Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar, and in this video we are going to be talking about lists for Legions of Nagash. So like my other two list building videos for the Beast of Chaos and the Flesh Eater Courts, this is very much going to follow the same format. I have got in this video 4 lists this time, one for each of the Legions of Nagash and of course the Grand Host of Nagash in there as well. So the 4 sub-allegiances for Legions of Nagash. And in like my other list building videos I've done, these lists are just lists that I've simply came up with. They're nothing from the internet, if you like. They're not going to be tournament winning lists. They're simply lists that I have picked because I think they'll be quite fun to play. Interestingly enough, the lists I used to run for my Legions of Nagash when I was playing them, a lot of Grand Hosts of Nagash games I've had, is no longer really viable because it mainly involves Nagash, and Nagash really is not worth taking at this current moment in time of recording. So I've had to be a bit more imaginative now. I've had to come up with a few different lists, so it should be quite interesting. So I haven't actually played with any of these, but these are all lists I would quite like to give a go because, like I say, I think they've got some tactics, but I think they'd be quite fun to play as well. So if there's anything you'd like to tell me about these lists, please let me know in the comments while you're watching. And also, please let me know lists that you like to take, what you think's quite fun, what you think's quite good, and it would be great to hear. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is going to be the Grand Host of Nagash list. And this one is actually partly inspired from a subscriber who commented on a community post asking if I could do a list that is quite skeleton focused, and that subscriber was, without butchering your name too much, Del Capitan. So we'll get on with it. Hopefully it'll be to your liking. So the idea behind this list, we'll firstly go through what is in the list, and then we'll break down on how I would play it and strengths and weakness. As you can see on the screen, we have a bit of a summary. If you can't read what's on the list, like I say, I am about to read through it, so don't worry too much. So firstly, looking at the leaders. So we've got a Vampire Lord. Now he is going to be the general. He is going to be a flying horror, so that just means he can fly with no any debuffs. It's the same as you could give him a horse as well for no extra cost, but flying will be more useful for this. Command trait, we've got Lord of Nagashazar, so that's how he's going to help give some skeletons some extra attacks. We then have Lord the Vampire, so basically his spell lore he can choose from in the Legions of Nagash, and he's gone for Vile Transference, which is a way to do mortal wounds to the enemy and also heal one of your units as well. And then our next hero is going to be a White King with Baleful Tomb Blade. Yep, we've got a White King in here. That's how sort of fun / narrative this list is. He has got a mount because he's on a steed, because at the moment of recording you can give him a horse for no extra points as well. So you might as well, if you're watching this in the future and you can't give him that, obviously just take away the horse. And he is going to have the artifact, which is Grave Sand Time Glass, which is a way for you to continuously do mortal wounds to a enemy hero. Then to finish off the heroes in this list, we are going to have 2 Necromancers. So the first one, their spell lore is obviously from the Death Mages, because that is their spell lore from the Legions of Nagash, and the first spell he's gone for is Fading Vigor, which is a way for you to -1 for enemy attacks and also to reduce their charge roll to a single dice. And then the next Necromancer is going to have the spell Spectral Grasp, which is a way to half enemy movement around a particular terrain feature, which I think is particularly useful. Okay, then going on to the battle line. Our first unit is a unit of 40 Skeleton Warriors with Ancient Blades. Our second unit is going to be a unit of 30 Graveguard with Great White Blades. Our next unit is going to be a unit of 10 Direwolves. Our next one's going to be a unit of 5 Direwolves. And our next unit is going to be a unit of 5 Direwolves as well. And then going on to our other units, we're going to have a unit of 4 Morghast Harbingers. So these are the ones that can charge the 3d6 rather than have the extra mortal wound save. And they have got Spirit Halberds. So they have not got the swords, they've got the high rending damage big glaives. And then we're going to have a Corpse Cart to help with magic. And then we're going to have a unit or 2 Bat Swarms to help counter enemy shooting. The list comes to a total of 1980 points out of 2000. Extra command points are nil. allies are 0 and wounds are 170, so plenty of them to go around. So how do we use this list on the tabletop? So firstly, talking about deployment. With your big blocks of death rattles, that's your block of 40 skeleton warriors and your block of 30 grave guard, we want to basically use those as protection for your heroes. So you're going to want to put your necromancers in those blocks, and you're going to want to put your White King and your Vampire Lord as well. So what blocks do we want to put on what? So if we just start with the unit of 40 skeleton warriors, we want to have a necromancer in the middle of that. Straight away, gives them the death save, everything. The necromancer can shrug off wounds onto the skeletons, and also gets the lookout Cyril. So that's the block of 40 skeleton warriors with one of the necromancers. So going on to the unit of 30 graveguard that are going to be particularly useful for us. It's one of our biggest killer units in this list, to be honest with you, and that's why you're going to want to have the Vampire Lord in it. You're also going to want to have the White King in it as well, and you're going to want to have the other Necromancer. The reason behind this is because the Necromancer, when it gets around to combat, it's going to put Manhail's Dance and Macabre on them, so let the Graveguard Paladin attack twice. We are then going to have the White King give them an extra artifact purely from his command ability, Lord of Bones. The same with the Vampire Lord. Is going to use his command trait, Lord of Nagash, that gives the death rattle within range of him an extra attack. And then we're going to use the vampire's own command ability to give the Graveguard an extra attack. However, when we deploy, of course, depending on the scenario, you may have to change this, but for as much as you can, I'd quite like to have the unit of 40 skeletons and the unit of 30 Graveguard quite close to each other. So this means that you can pass these buffs on depending on whoever's going to be the most in combat, if you like. There's no point stacking all these extra attacks onto the Graveguard if the Skeleton Warriors are going to be the ones fighting that turn. So that's the idea there, particularly because with how much synergy your heroes are going to give to your skeleton units. For example, the Graveguard start with 2 attacks each. By the time you give them an extra one for the White King, Vampire Lord command ability, and then the Vampire Lord, Lord of Nagash command trait, you've added an extra 3 attacks, so now they've gone from 2 attacks each to 5 attacks. And then when you look at Manhail's Dance Macabre and they Paladin attack twice, that means they're attacking twice. So obviously that is 10 attacks you could get from those Graveguard that turn. Even more attacks from the Skeleton Warriors, but obviously without the rend and the chance of doing 2 damage. So that's the idea there. That's why we've also gone with white blades, so the Great Blade for the Graveguard, rather than the shield. I standardly go for the shield to help their saves out, but here they're all out offensively. So I like to think that that is our leaders and our skeleton units talked about how we're going to set them up. Also, the other thing I want to say is if you're wondering what's the ranges for all these abilities, and I'm saying, to be honest, it's going to take too long for me to go through every single thing for every single list. So just get it up on your phone or whatever and have a look. So the next thing we have on our list to talk about for deployment is going to be still the Battleline. So this is going to be our 3 units of direwolves. Now, the one job this units of direwolves have is to protect your other units. So to protect your Graveguard, particularly how we say they haven't got the shields, to protect your Skeleton Warriors if needed, and of course the Morghast Harbingers, which we'll get to in a moment. The important thing also with the direwolves to remember is they are your fast units in this army, really. There are 20 models that are fast in this army. So you want to use those for tactical play if you need to, in terms of taking objectives, or in terms of quickly running to hold an objective for 1 or 2 turns before they probably get killed off. And the reason why we've gone for 3 units instead of if we just did 2 units of 10 is purely just to give you more diversity and choice of your options with how you want to move them around. I want to do a unit of 10 just to keep making it a bit more survivable on the table, and particularly how in Grand Host of Nagash you have even more chance of healing up your models. And the idea is a unit of 10 can screen a huge amount of the board And the interesting thing is when we go through these lists, some of them don't have so much ball control, like we can see in this Grand Host and Nagash list. But if you have so many direballs, because of the size of their bases and how far you can stretch them out, you can make quite good ball control with that against enemy summoning and stuff. So the direballs are there to screen and to hold / quickly nip and take objectives if needed. And then we have the units of the 4 Morghast Harbingers. They're there purely because they have to be. They have to be something like them there. You can't just have your Grave Guard be the only things in this army with, like a rend attack and very offensive output. You need the Morghast Harbingers because now you're going to have 3 units in your army that can do up some damage. Admittedly, Skeleton Warriors, they can throw out a lot of attacks, but it's going to be mainly aimed at things with not very good saves to make the most of them, but they can still chuck out a hell of a lot of attacks, what we've already explained. The Grave Guard are a good medium between them and the Morghast, and the reason why we've gone for Harbingers is because they have the 3d6 charge, which is really good. I honestly can't undervalue how useful that's been for me in the past. I have actually, my personal ones, I've modelled them as Archive because I used to prefer the Archive 5-up mortal wound save, because I used to fight against a lot of armies with mortal wounds, and so they're modelled with the armour, but I think the armour looks cool anyway. The reason we've gone for Spirit Hellbirds is because this army does not lack the capability of chucking out loads of weak attacks. What it does lack is high rend and damage, and that is why we have gone for the Hellbirds for the Morghast Harbingers, and to be honest, personally, I think it looks cooler, and they are my favourite weapon. Who doesn't like a -2 rend damage-free weapon? Come on. And then we have the Corpse Cart. So that is there to buff your magic. You've got 3 casters in this list. So to give them +1 to cast is very useful. Especially how we go into the next bit in a moment, and I'll explain why that is. And then we're going to have a unit of 2 Bat Swarms. So this means that they're just there to help against the enemy shooting, because this list can really suffer if the enemy has very good, like what I like to call snipey shooting to pick out characters. Because if you take away the characters in this list, the list isn't just flat out it's over, but it's taken away all those extra attacks you want to give those skeletons and Grave Guard. And the vampire, like I say, he could give his command B attack onto the Morghast Harbingers if he wanted to. So that's why it's there. Also, a quick thing to say about Morghast Harbingers, what I didn't mention, in Grand Host and Nagash, they're also going to get that extra attack. So that's why I always like to include them in this list. Or if I'm building any list for Grand Host and Nagash, really. So with that, the other thing I want to say, how we want to play now that we're set up. And like I say, Morghast Harbingers, if you need to set them up away from the rest of your main force, do. But if you don't, keep them all a bit close so you can really buff what synergies you need to, depending on, the situation you're faced. The Corpse Cart, unless it has to sit on an objective for no other reason the other side of the board, deploy it in the amongst of your army. Really, maybe try and protect it a little bit with your skeletons. It's not always a bad idea to put it in the middle. And then the Bat Swarms, want them quite up board wherever the enemy shooting is, really, as far as they can go. Obviously, you can put things in grave sites if you want to, which may be useful depending on your situation. But there's always the chance you risk of not being able to bring the thing out of the grave site. But something you can use with the Bat Swarms is having in the grave site, have a grave site hard up the board. When a hero gets enraged, boom, puts up the Bat Swarms, and it actually made them closer to the enemy shooting unit on your first turn than they would have been otherwise. But if you get Alpha Strike, like something you can see by this list has 12 drops. In these lists, I'm not really bothered about low drop armies, to be honest, because in my honest opinion, unless you want to be as competitive as possible, it's really narrows down what you can take, and sometimes you want to take something you can't because you worry about drops. And as long as you're fine with going second and you have a plan around it, but also it's just important as having an idea of what you want to do if the opponent lets you go first. So how I would play the list as well, as we're continuing to screen our Death Rattle units here, and in particularly the Grave Guard, because like I say, they've got those great white blades, and they are really our offensive unit. That's also one of the reasons I went for the Ancient Blades for the Skeleton Warriors, because I know you can't get as many to attack at once. But if, let's say, your Skeleton Warriors and your Grave Guard had the opportunity, who are you going to attack first? The Grave Guard. So you might as well not really worry too much about how many casualties the Skeletons take. But anyway, what we're talking about as a die wall. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue using them to screen our death rattle units. But unless you're really scared that the enemy is going to fly over your screen and attack those units you're trying to protect, you're going to want to have the die walls a good distance away from your death rattle so they can take middle battlefield objectives if that is what the battle plan is, because they want to take the objectives and hold them just long enough for your death rattle to get up to them, because like I said, your die walls are very fast in this army and this is the list, but your death rattle is very slow. And we could have gone with Death March, but really I don't like that battalion. I don't think it's worth 150 points from how I've played it in the past. So that is my way to do it. Capture the objectives and continue to screen, unless of course the enemy has really strong flying units, then that's something you have to bear in mind. But maybe if you stagger your die walls in a certain way, you can still achieve that. So die walls capture the objectives while your death rattle units are slowly moving up. And that's how it kind of plays really. And then when you death rattle units get close enough, particularly your Graveguard, like I say, then that's when all the buffs get stacked to them, if everything goes well, of course. And what I like about that is it costs resources to do it. You know, it's going to cost you 2 command points for each of the command abilities from the Vampire Lord and the White King to do, and then the command tree, which the Vampire Lord has. You're not relying on a spell. The only spell you're relying on is Madhouse Dance Macabre. You're not relying on spells to get those extra attacks. So there's not too much risk in there for you, and because you, unless something bad happens, you're not going to desperately want to use command points in your first turn, so you can always kind of clock one first off as well. So that's why I haven't put in an extra command point in the list. And the reason, like I say, the 4 Morgus Harbingers on there, it's just because if it doesn't work out with the death rattle stuff, you still have something else that can do some damage, and something with high rend and like I say, damage output. So yeah, that's about it really. I think I've talked about it for long enough. Just going over what I put for strengths and weaknesses. So like I say, summary is a horde. It's combat aggressive, very common for death, to be honest. Board control, because you have quite a few big size units. And then strengths, high volume attacks. Yep, strong regenerating power. Yeah, so that's something I want to say as well. Because like I said, the Grand Host of Nagash gets a generic way to basically bring back your models. I think if you roll dice on a 5-up, you can do it for each summonable unit. You also have grave sites, and then because you've got a lot of heroes, you have a lot of people definitely invocation to be able to bring back models as well. So if your skeleton warriors and your Graveguard take quite a bit of a hit, as well as your dire walls, you can try and regenerate them pretty well. So yeah, I'm definitely a pretty good fan of that one, and also your bat swarms, because they are, I believe, they're summonable. And yes, going on to the next thing is we have not bad magic output. So the reason I put not bad is because you have a corpse cast giving you a +1, so that's good. And you have 3 casters, which is good. They only cast 1 spell each, and like, if I was to put, you know, good magic output, if you watched my Flesh Eater Court video, you saw that when an Archregent on a Bellwind Vortex is casting 3 spells with +3, and then the other wizards in the list, which are 3, are all getting +1 as well. That's, you know, that is good magic output. This is just, you know, it's not bad, it's pretty good. If it comes across anything with, you know, +2 to unbind, and they can unbind multiple spells, it's going to struggle to compete with that. So yeah, it's got a lot of models as well, a lot of Battleline units as well, and the reason why I want to highlight that as a strength is because some of the battle plans out there now, not all of them, but some of them that I've read, at least one anyway, you get additional points for capturing objectives with like a Battleline unit or a Battleline unit being nearby, or you can only capture objectives with a Battleline unit. So it is a useful thing to take note of now. You also have a chance of a triumph as well, because you've got 20 points down, not the biggest chance, but certainly gives you a punt at it. And then you've got a load of skeletons. So like I say, I hope the scriber who wanted the skeleton army is happy. I think you wanted pure skeletons, and this is obviously diverts a bit, but you know, if you wanted nothing but skeletons, you can do it, but I think it lacks a little bit of flavour for me anyway. And then when we go to weaknesses, to be honest, mostly bad saves, because you've got death rattle units, of course. You have got some 4-up saves and stuff with like the Harbingers, the Graveguard, there's no enemy rend, and your White King or Baleful Tombblade has a 3-up save. And if you're wondering, that's why we went with him, just because he's got the 3-up with Lookout Search to stay alive. Because, like I said, if the enemy snipes away your heroes, your list kind of falls apart a little bit. And then I say a lot of investment into helping the Death Rattle units, which I think I've already explained. It's a slow list, generally, because how slow skeletons are already, and your foot slogging heroes. Apart from, to be fair, the Flying Horror of the Vampire Lord is pretty fast, and the Steed of the White King is fast, but they'll be amongst your skeleton units, so unless they need to get out, they will be moving as slow as the skeletons. And then suffers against heavy enemy shooting, which I think I've summarised pretty well. I just want to quickly mention the spells I went for, so why they're important before I go. Move on to the next list. So firstly, the Vile Transference of the Vampire Lord. Now, the enemy is going to try and kill, like I say, these heroes as quickly as possible. So Vile Transference, you need to be a bit close to the enemy to do it, but it means like turn 2 onwards, shall we say, maybe, the vampire has another way to regenerate wounds, or he can use this to regenerate wounds on another multi-wound unit. Being, like the Harbingers, or even Bat Swarms, or White Kings, Necromancers, etc. The White King has gone with the artifact, the Gravesand Time Glass, because what it does essentially from turn 1, you do D3 more wounds to an enemy hero you pick. I think you might be able to pick more than an enemy hero, but an enemy hero is often the best thing to pick. A 5 wound hero, let's say you're picking the enemy, that's a good buff piece. He's given a lot of synergy out. You do D3 mortal wounds to him at the start, so let's just say average 2 mortal wounds, and then in each of your hero phases going on, roll dice on a 4-up, another mortal wound to him. So you could kill a 5 wound hero without engaging him in shooting, combat, or magic, by just doing this artifact. So it's a very useful, and it's kind of an easy choose artifact. You don't really know what to go for. It's a very effective, shall we say, without much work being put into it at all. So with the 2 Necromancers, Fading Vigor, like I say, to help stop the enemy charges, really getting too close, and when they do, to not cause too much damage with that as well, because you want your skeleton units to kind of be intact, because like I say, you've got direwolves to screen. The direwolves can fade and melt away, shall we say. And then we have the second Necromancer, who has got Special Grasp. This is a real good way to slow down the enemy, because you pick a terrain feature within range, and enemy units, I believe, that are within 3 inches of that terrain feature are half their movement characteristic, and I believe it's rounding down as well. So something moves 5 inches is now moving 2. So now your skeletons are moving twice as fast as they are. So it is very useful. Particularly how you want to catch those objectives, like I say, with your direwolves. But you don't want the enemy to move too far up either, so the direwolves could hold them for at least a turn, and so the enemy can't go over your direwolves to attack your Death Rattle units. So with that, guys, I am very happy to say that I think the first review for the list number 1 is done, and happy to move on to list 2. Now, something I mentioned when I did my the Flesh Eater Court list is because some of the units I use in each list, I won't go full in depth and explain what they do again, obviously, because I'll just be repeating myself. So you'll find now when I go through the rest of the list, it will tend to be a bit quicker. So list number 2, Legion of Sacrament. Now, there will be no Grimghast Reapers in this list as a first off, because like I say, these lists are a bit different to the ones you see out there. So what do we have in the list? So leaders, we have a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. Couldn't really get too much further in this video without mentioning that title, because he is very useful in this army. He is the general. He has the Death Lance and Shield and Chalice. He has the command trait Emissary of the Master. He has the artifact as a Bane standard. And then his spell is taken from the Lord of the Vampires, is Vile Transference, so the same one as we saw in the previous list, to help with survival. And then we have Prince Verhordre. So his Law of the Vampires spell is Amphime Orb, and that's because he's a named character and sort of customization you can give him. And then we have a Khan Wraith as our last hero. And then our battle line, very straightforward. 5 units of 5 direwolves. Yes, I like direwolves, and particularly the undead variation. And then our other units is a unit of 4 Morghast Harbingers, like in the last list, and a unit of 2 Bat Swarms, like in the last list. And then we have a Behemoth, which is a Mortis Engine. We then also have spent an extra 50 points to get an additional command point. So that's going to bring us to a total of 2,000 points out of 2,000. 1 extra command point, ally 0, and a wound of 128 spread across the army. Okay, so now breaking into the list. So the whole idea of this list is there is a double team between the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon and Prince of Hordre. How are we going to achieve this? So the command trait Emissary of the Master allows you to reroll charge rolls for death units within 6 inches of the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. Prince of Hordre, be within 6 inches. Now, they are both re-rolling their charge rolls as they really want to get their charge. And then what we do is we like to charge them in quite closely together. They can buff each other later on. And the great thing with this is they can really help each other with their buffs, because the command ability from the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon is to give a death unit re-rolls to hit. And there are certainly a lot of attacks for both of these models. So you can pick whoever you want to put that on, depending on who needs it. And then Prince of Hordre, his command ability is you pick a hero in your hero phase that's not him and is a death hero, and then they can either cast a spell or they can attack. So your Prince of Hordre is making the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon attacking in your hero phase. So now it's almost you're getting 3 Vampire Lords and Zombie Dragons attacking, essentially. And that is a nice little buff they get between them. The other thing I like about Prince of Hordre is his spell isn't Blood Boil, which is the normal Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon spell. He has a different one, and that is +1 to his hit and wound rolls for that turn to the caster, whoever casts it, which is great. However, you can't always guarantee your magic going off, hence why we've got the Mortis engine in there to give him the +1 to help him with that cast. The reason we went for the Mortis engine, not the Corpse Cart, Mortis engine is faster and it can tank a bit more, and it has a way to be able to heal Prince of Hordre and the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, as well as they are your damage dealers in this army. Their team is the main part of this army, and the great thing about them, like I say, if they're all next to each other, reroll charge rolls without spending command points, and they can really buff each other and really help their attacks out. So instead of me, before I was looking into this, thinking the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon is much better than just having one of them and Prince of Hordre. Prince of Hordre is very good, and like I say, it's particularly how the Ethereal Amulet has gone away, like we all know. The Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon is not so a indestructible choice to pick. So Prince of Hordre has a bit more of a chance now, and that's why I think it would be a really cool thing to try. Like I say, very fast, very hard hitting. They can obviously split up, but they work pretty well together, and it makes a nice sledgehammer. The reason we went for Amifime Orb for Prince of Hordre may not be the best spell to go for, but it just means if he really needs to do more mortal wound damage, he's got a good spell to do it with. And then going on to really explain the rest of the list, what we have is, like I say, the Calm Wraith, and that sort of links into our rest of the units, because he essentially is just there to help out your other units with getting a death save. That's why he's there. He's the cheapest hero you can get for death, and he's just there. Well, cheapest hero you can get for death in Legions of Nagash, and he's just there to give them the death save for Legions of Nagash, essentially. And that is really needed because you only have like your 5 units of 5 direwolves to take objectives and to try and hold ground on the board, really. So you have to be very well played with those. The reason why I've got a unit of 4 Morgos Harbingers, because you can go, why have you got that? Why have you not invested more into like objective hold and stuff? It's simply because, as good as I've just said the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon and Prince of Hordre team is, you need another threat. You need 3 threats. That's the sort of golden rule. 2 threats at least, but 3 threats ideally. Particularly, like I say, you want to keep the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon and Prince of Hordre close together. What about the rest of the board? What's dealing with that? So you've got Morgos Harbingers to deal with that. Of course, like I say, you can send Prince of Hordre off doing something else, but you really want to have a independent unit. And like I say, if you take the Calm Wraith with the Harbingers, you are now giving them the death save to make them a bit more survivable. So now the enemy has, like I said, the Prince, the Vampire Lord, and the Harbingers to deal with. They can't just go, right, okay, he's going to hit me with 2 big things in the same place. That's fine. I can just lock them in place for a while and everything. They've got multiple threats to deal with, essentially. The Bat Swarms are there to hamper enemy shooting again, because the enemy can really focus fire on your very killy units. And then, like I say, the Mortis Engine is there to heal your zombie dragons, essentially, and to buff their casting. And it's a an other big model for the enemy, particularly if they haven't really fought against the Mortis engine. They think, oh, I kind of want to take that thing out. It looks scary. It's another distraction piece at the end of the day, really. And that, to be honest, is about it. The extra command point there is purely just to help you go like, oh, I really don't have that command point to make my Vampire and Zombie Dragon attacking hero phase. Boom, there you go, you got it. So just to help you with that, and that's also why I really like getting the reroll charges for free, because that is what you'd be sinking your command points into. And then it may mean that at one point in the game you're left with one command point free, and you've got a Calm Wraith near a grave site, and you've had a unit of direwolves die, and you can bring them back to take an objective if they need, late game sort of stuff. So that is the idea behind this list. Then just looking at the summary, so it is elite, yep, of course, it's combat aggressive, it's high magic. The reason why I sort of highlighted the magic this time is purely like in the last list. The vampire is fairly survivable, but your necromancers can die very easily. So I like to think that your Prince Vahordre and your Vampire and Zombie Dragon would survive a little bit longer to be casting those spells. They sort of rely on their magic casting, and the Mortis engine's giving them +1, and because it's Legion of Sacrament, they are also getting an inherent +1 there as well, so they're getting +2 to their magic casting capabilities, which is very essential. And because the Mortis engine is more survivable, far more survivable than the Corpse Cart, for an extra 100 points essentially, it's going to be given that +1 for even longer, so they'll be +2 for quite a long time. So it's 10 drops, of course. Then strengths, we've got strong damage output, yep. Good zombie dragon team, like I've explained. Good magic buff, yep. It's fast, yep. That's something to mention. I think the slowest moving thing in this list is the Calm Wraith, and movement 6, and then it's like the Morgus Harbingers and movement 9. So I think that's it. So yeah, it's pretty goddamn fast army. Within reason, before we get silly with eels and stuff. So we have a lot of Battleline units again, which is useful for, like I say, those scenarios where they can help you with objective taking and points and stuff. And then we have multiple threats. Like I said, we have 3 threats. We haven't just got the Zombie Dragon team. In case that goes south, you have also got the Morgus Harbingers to rescue your Prince and the Vampire Lord in a sort of Black Hawk Down scenario, I can only imagine, where the Zombie Dragons have tragically crashed and burned and in flames, and then you have the 2 heroic vampires fighting to the last, and then you have the Morgus Harbingers that come in essentially and try and help out, but better than the Humvees. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Right, so that is pretty much the strengths we have there. So going on to weaknesses, we have low model count, we have hard to hold objectives, have to play the dogs well, like I mentioned, and suffers against heavy enemy shooting, which, like I say, you'll see some of these strengths and weaknesses repeated because a lot of the lists shame the same strengths and weaknesses, to be honest, how I built them. And when I say you have to play the dogs well, I really can't underestimate that. It could be a thing like by just having to, if you imagine by how it looks going up the board towards your opponent, you may have to stagger the dogs a little bit to be able to, let's say you're holding an objective with a unit of dogs, and then you've got 2 more 5-man units of dogs who are also there to hold the objective. Don't just put them in the middle objective. Like, try and block the enemy from getting to your unit of dogs furthest back that can sort of hide away at the back while holding that objective, while your other 2 units sort of sacrifice themselves. You have to be a bit clever with it. Also, like I said in the last list, use the dogs to screen by all means if you can afford to. By protecting your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon if they're not going out straight away, with the Prince of Vahordre as well, and with the Morgus Harbingers. The great thing about screening flying units is that your flying units can just fly over. It's not like if you're screening the Grave Guard, as in the other list, and your Grave Guard can't exactly just fly over the direwolves in that list. So, yeah, I think I've explained that fair enough. I do like the idea of taking Prince of Vahordre, particularly since I did that short lore video on him. I think he is particularly cool. I just love the sort of cruel irony in Nagash's punishments, and it'd be nice to take him on tabletop. He has also got I think it's the Breath of Shy shooting attack with the Zombie Dragon, which is a nice way to do, basically up to 6 mortal wounds to your enemy. So yeah, I think he definitely has play. Right, okay, then moving on to our next list, which is Legion of Blood. And I asked myself a very important question when I put together this list. I was like, can I fit 2 Khan Wraiths in a list in my Legions of Nagash army? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try. Consequently, I also managed to fit in 3 Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragons, because in the last list 2 simply was not enough. So yep, we've got 3 of the bastards in here, and just enough to maybe make this list kind of work. So it's a little bit crazy, and you can probably tell from the other lists as well. So what we've got, like I say, Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, he's a general. He's got Death Lance and Shield and Chalice, and that's going to be the same for the other Vampire Lords and Zombie Dragons. He's got the Command Tray Aristocracy of Blood, which is going to let Soulblight units, I believe, within 9 inches of him reroll their charges. Similar kind of idea, you can probably gather what this list is going to do like the previous one. So, and then his spell is Vile Transference as well to regenerate those wounds he's most certainly going to lose. And then that is it for him. And then we have the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon for the next one, obviously, and his spell is the Amplify Morb to do those mortal wounds. And then the next Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon's got Amplify Pinions to help him with movement if he's going to need it. And then we have 2 Khan Wraiths. And then for Battleline, we have got 6 units of Direwolves, because, you know, 5 units was not enough, and I really love my doggies. And then we also, to finish the list, have a unit of 2 Bat Swarms, and then a command point extra, bringing us to a total of 1990 points out of 2000, with the extra command point, 0 allies, and 120 wounds. Right, so this list is quite straightforward. The only thing you have in this list is a very, very heavy sledgehammer of a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon bundle. So like what the strategy was in the previous list, like that but bigger, essentially. So the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, the one being your general, I apologise, it doesn't say it on the screen, but he is meant to have the spell called Orb of Enchantment, and that's going to play a role. So he goes in the middle of your other 2 Zombie Dragons, so he can obviously give the aura of getting that reroll charges without spending 3 command points if needed. They all basically hit as one big wave. They don't need to cuddle each other, but as long as they're within about 10 inches of each other, it'd be quite nice in case they need to buff each other with their, you know, like rerolls to hit. I suppose they don't really need to do that, but in case one of them's taken enough damage, shall we say, that it requires some help. Or you can spread them out as much as you want, as long as you get that first charge in. That's the main thing here. So you want to do that, get the charge in, and then you want to go, right, so probably the most important one here is your general, isn't it? You don't want your general to die. That's why you've given him the artifact, the Orb of Enchantment, because this is going to make sure that he charges an enemy hero, because then he can make that enemy hero, once per battle, if he elects it at the start of the combat phase, and it's within 3 inches of him, not be able to pile in, attack, or use abilities. So the reason why that also works quite well is because if you look at most armies, if the enemy's got a monster in it, it will tend to be in the middle of their army, because it's a monster that's probably also a hero or a character that's giving off a buffing aura, so it's placed in the middle. Now, it might not always be placed in the front line, of course, but you know, if it is, or you've managed to breathe to death whatever was screening it, because I think you have your Pestilent Breath with your Zombie Dragon attack, and because you've got those rerolls to charge, you can take away their screen and probably still guarantee the charge. Your general has gone straight into the big scary enemy hero, and it's gone, right, you can't attack this turn. So then that means that you can easily pick one of your other Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragons to attack without worrying about your general taking too much damage, because you go, no, the big scary thing in front of him can't attack me this turn. And that might only just be one turn, but it's enough for you to attack with the others Vampire Lords and Zombie Dragons, and then your general attack the big scary hero in front of him and probably knock it down quite a few wounds before it can even attack your general, and that works out quite well. I know it sounds quite straightforward how I'm saying it. Obviously, you know, spanners do also get in the works and can sometimes for your plans. If your plan of your sledgehammers or your vampire lords and zombie dragons, if they get killed early on or something, this list completely falls apart, to be completely honest with you. But if it all holds together for long enough, your vampire lords and zombie dragons can do insane damage. Can you make this better? Yeah, sure. You can try and narrow, drops down and everything, and put in the cogs or something to help you try and get a turn 1 charge, and you can put the amplifying pinions on like whatever vampire lord and zombie dragon is the most important one to be able to get up the board. You can do all this, but this is just something fun I quickly came up with. So that's the idea behind that. And then you might be going, why did you spend 120 points on Calm Race if you don't have many points to spend? Calm Race there to give a death save to your direwolves, just keep them alive for a bit longer because they're the only things holding your objectives. And also, if you're playing a battle plan where it goes, right, you control the objectives of your heroes, you might be going, fuck, that's ruined my strategy. So at least you could just go, no worries, vampire lords and zombie dragons, go out, Calm Race, just sit back and hold the objectives. So it gives you some helping hands out there. Right, so the summary, it's monster elite, no shit. It's combat heavy and it's got 12 drops. You probably won't be going first, like most of these lists. And then going into the strengths, it's strong damage output, of course. 3 vampire lords on zombie dragons. Speaks for itself, really. It's fast. It's got a load of Battleline units. It's got multiple threats and a chance of a triumph. And then going on to weaknesses, it's got a low model count. Everything is invested into the vampire lords and zombie dragons, which it is. Hard to hold objectives, of course. Have to play the dogs well, obviously. And suffers against heavy enemy shooting. So a lot of the similar sort of stuff. The only other thing I wanted to say is I looked in putting in Blood Knights into this list. I've personally never played with Blood Knights. I've never owned them. And I've never really done a conversion for them. But the reason I didn't put them in the list is, like I say, I wanted to do the 3 vampire lords and zombie dragons. But also, and I know they're not essentially cheap to buy, but you can get them in a start collecting box. The Blood Knights, as cool as I think they are, I mean, like, it's just over like 60 odd quid here in the UK to get a unit of 5 of them, and the resin and the lances are bent like all crap. But I still think they're cool. I don't want to diss them too much, but I don't want to make up a list of going like, what you want to do is you want to take 15 of these guys, because it's a lot of money to spend on that kit. So I didn't want to. I thought it would be a bit of a wasted list, to be honest, from most people watching this. And the only thing I wanted to say as well for Legion of Blood is I really wanted to put Neferata here, but I just can't put her in. She's my favourite, or at least one of my favourite characters from Age of Sigmar and the world that was. But the problem I have is how she plays at the moment. At least every year her points are gradually coming down. The way she plays at the moment is that she obviously gives like a, minus the hit aura and everything, but she needs to be in combat to regenerate wounds and to do some damage to the enemy, but she can't do enough damage, and she's just not nearly survivable. She has 11 wounds with a 4-up save, and that's the same with the other Mortarks as well. And it's just, these are meant to be really good characters. They're on awesome mounts and everything, and it's 11 wounds is far too little. Why not 12, or 11 wounds with a 3-up save? Obviously I know 11 wounds with a 3-up save is a lot better, but I'd be happy with 12 wounds and a 4-up save. They just die so easily, and because of that 11 wounds, it just means that there's been very few games I've taken a Mortark and it hasn't died very early on, and before it needed to do it did, or just generally survive the game. So I'd love to take Neferata, at the moment in time, I just can't. I know I said these are a bit of a fun list and stuff, but I'd rather spend like another 100 points, or how many more points it is, chucking a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. And also how the Legions of Nagash work at the moment in their book. As soon as you take that Mortark and their Legion, they have to be the general, so you lose a command trait. So there's little positive to take them. So with that note, I'd like to go on to my 4th and final list, which is, of course, the Legion of Night. And what we have in our leaders is we have a Mortark, because I think they are really useful in the game now. And I think they are really worth their points these days, and they just add so much to your list. Joking aside, the reason I have Manfred in here, to be not a complete hypocrite, is because I thought I couldn't do a Legions of Nagash list without having one Mortark in here, particularly if I don't even have Nagash in any of these lists. I need to have, well, I say any, I could only have it in the Grand Host anyway, but I need to have a Mortark, and Manfred is probably not the best choice. You'd probably better go an Arcan, but I wanted to make the last list a little bit different. So what do we have? It's obviously Legion of Night. It's actually going to be in the realm of Beast. So Gur, this one, it's going to be the only list we've reviewed that's from a realm, because realms are less important these days, depending on if you want to read certain artifact. So we've got Manfred, Mortark of Night. We also have a Calm Wraith, and the Calm Wraith is going to have the artifact from the realm of Beast, which is Predator's Talk, which just allows him to reroll his charge rolls. And quickly say for Manfred, his spell is from the Law of the Dead, so Necromancer spell, and it's the Spectral Grasp, so it's the way to half enemy movement. And then going on to Battleline, we're going to have 2 units of 5 Dire Wolves and a unit of 40 Skeleton Warriors with Ancient Spears. And then we're going to have, for our other units, a unit of 30 Grave Guard with White Blades and Crypt Shields, a unit of 4 Morgos Harbingers, and 2 Bat Swarms. And then we're going to have a Behemoth of a Terrorgeist, because why not? And then we're going to have an extra command point. It's going to bring us to a total of 90 points out of 2,000, an extra command point, the 0 allies, and 153 wounds. So, to break down this list. The idea behind it is, with Legion of Night, your Death Rattle units that are wholly within your territory get +1 to their save. It's called the Bait, the ability. So as long as you can keep your Death Rattle units wholly within your territory, and remember that changes with every battle plan, so remember to keep an eye on the little map you're given for deployment reasons. It is useful. But essentially what that means is that your skeletons, and if we just firstly presume there is no Rend coming at you, your skeletons get a 5-up save normally, now goes for 4-up, and then your Grave Guard, like I say, if no Rend comes against them with their Crypt Shields, they get a 3-up save, which with regeneration is pretty damn survivable. Okay, so that is where I say this list is defensive, because you have your Death Rattle, holding objectives with that benefit to their save. Now you may be going like, well, if the objectives are in the middle of the board, let's say they are in the middle of the board, but you could probably, if your territory isn't specifically shrunk, you can probably hold the objective without crossing the line into the enemy territory. You might need to sit back a little bit, but as long as you can be within range of the objective, it's fine. It's worth getting the +1, unless you, of course, need to overtake the amount of models the enemy already has an objective to take it from them. I'm only talking about from a defensive point of view. So we're also going to have Manfred with your skeletal units to basically be a bit of muscle there. Like I say, he's good, but he can die, but not as easily as Neferata. He's got more ways of surviving, I would say, and he's more effective in combat. So, well, as he got more ways of surviving, he's not doing the -1 to hit aura, but he's got ways to ignore a wound per turn, if that's really mean anything. Anyway, let us go on. So he's there to regen some of your skeleton units, and like I say, a bit of muscle there, and to be a magic caster, and because I wanted him in the list, to be quite frankly, and him hiding behind a bunch of poor warriors he's resurrected from the dead to fight another day kind of sounds like something Manfred would do. The units of Dire Wolves, 2 units of 5 to screen your Grave Guard and your Skeleton Warriors to make them a bit tougher, or to plop on objective if needed. Kind of what we've been using for Dire Wolves in the past, in the other lists. Then lastly, the Bat Swarms, which are there to make the enemy -1 to hit, because if you're taking a defensive role, the enemy could just sit and shoot you if they have that available. So by having the Bat Swarms there, it means that they have to target the Bat Swarms, and this is something I could say for every list I've had Bat Swarms in this video. Even if you could say, well, the enemy just target and get rid of the Bat Swarms really easily with their shooting. Yeah, that's wasted a turn of their shooting though. So keeping the Bat Swarms there for the -1 to hit for enemy shooting is useful, particularly how Manfred's not going to get the Lookout Sir ability. So that is the defensive part. Where does the aggressive part in? Because you can't just sit there. So the aggressive part comes in with the second ability really that the Legion of Night gets, which is, I think it's called Ancient Cunning. So essentially this allows you to set up 3 units off the board and bring them on later. So just like Manfred, this allows you to be very sneaky. So what I've decided to put off the board is the Calm Wraith, the unit of 4 Morgos Harbingers, and the Terrorgeist. Why did I pick them? So let's do the Morgos Harbingers first. Like I've already mentioned, they charge 3d6. So it means that they have got a better chance of charging in because they have to set up, when they come on from off the board, I think it's wholly within 6 inches of the board edge and 9 inches away from the enemy. So let's say you're going to be that 9 inches. By charging 3d6, I think that means that your average charge goes to it's either a 10 or a 11. So that should get you in. And then we also have the Calm Wraith there to allow you to re-roll the charge roll if needed. That's why he's there. That's the only reason he's there, is to help the Harbingers or the Terrorgeist, which we'll get to in a moment, get their charge in. Because there's nothing worse coming off the board edge and going, aha, I'm going to charge you, and then you fail your charge, and then you just get swamped by the enemy next turn. So you really want to hit when you come on. You want to do your surprise attack, essentially. You've got the initiative. You don't want to lose it. So that's the idea there. And then why have we got the Terrorgeist in there? The Terrorgeist simply is because even if it's not a Flesh-Eater Court Terrorgeist, people have this idea of the Terrorgeist being terrifying, funny enough. So that is why we've got him in the list. 300 points, it's not a bad punt. I'd like to give it a go because he can come from the board. He can start shooting at the enemy straight away because of his Scream ability. Would be in range if he's 9 inches away from the enemy. And he can do so much mortal wound output. And I know that, in this list, he's not re-rolling all his hits. Gruesome Bite. He's not got Feeding Frenzy, but he has the chance of doing that much damage potential. And that's all you need. You only need chance because then that means that he has the potential, and that is when the threat becomes real for your enemy. Because, yeah, your enemy could go, well, he might not get any 6s to hit. He might not do any of those 6 more wins to me, but he might do. So the enemy has then got to think about that. And that is really where we come into it while we have the Calm Wraith in there. With the Predator's Talk, is because he can reroll his charge rolls. You might be thinking, a little Calm Wraith, you put that artifact on him, waste of an artifact. Admittedly, he's the only one who can take an artifact in this list, but why put that on him? That's because he can then charge the enemy as well with that reroll. He should be able to get a 9 with 2 attempts, so that he can give even the Harbingers unit or the Terrorgeist unit, or if they all came on the same board edge and right next to each other, both units, and himself, the death save, because those units without a death save could die fairly quickly, particularly the Terrorgeist. So yeah, that's the idea behind it. And what this means is that when you've got these units off the board, your opponent can't focus on just getting straight to you and smashing your skeleton units aside. Don't get me wrong, if they are a fucking strong alpha army, they are going to hit you as hard and as fast as possible and probably destroy your defensive units before your stuff comes on from the board, and you've probably lost the game. But like I say, these lists aren't the most competitive out there. So if you're not playing against something like that, your opponent is going to have to set up their army knowing that a Terrorgeist, a unit of 4 Morgos Harbingers, and the most terrifying thing at all, the Calm Wraith, could come on behind them or flank them or any direction. So they have to set up their army with that in mind, which means they can't send all their forces out to hit you as soon as possible, which means that your skeletons then have more time to move up slowly onto objectives and puts your defensive units in place more easily, because your enemy is having to keep things in reserve and back to deal with your Morgos Harbingers and your Terrorgeist. And the other thing which is nice about this is that your enemy is probably going to want to save their high damage and high rend units to take on the Morgos Harbingers and the Terrorgeist, which means that they'll probably might be attacking your Graveguard and your Skeleton Warriors, anything with Crypt Shield really, without rend, which means that you'll inherently be getting the extra +1 save, so it works quite useful there. So yeah, that's how I'd use the list. And then going into the summary, so it's sneaky, like I say, very much like Manfred. It's combat aggressive and it's defensive, which I think is the most defensive out of these lists, I'd say. And then going into strength, so strong damage output, yep, defensive death rattle, almost as defensive as you can get. Multiple threats, like I've mentioned, sneaky, and we have a Mortark in the list, which I think is very cool. And going on to weaknesses, low amount of heroes. Yeah, 2 heroes in a death army is really low. Your Grave Guards will help you make up for that through regeneration, but still you will feel the lack of heroes. Like if you like the idea of this list and you just wanted to make it more competitive, take Manfred out, put in a Necromancer of 2, and you know it's already getting better. It does rely a lot on the ambush. You know, if your ambush goes south, you're in trouble. Enemy could stop your units coming onto the board. Yet they could screen it. If you're playing against a massive horde army and they just screened everything, they'll stop your units coming onto the board, which is you're just bringing them onto your board edge. You basically wasted a turn with them, but it could be worse. Suffers against enemy rend. Like I say, if the enemy takes a lot of rend against your death row units, all the defensive setup you've done is you're still going to get that +1 if you're in your territory, but your skeleton warriors, for example, could still maybe not get a save. And then weaknesses, we've got a Mortark on the list. So like I say, as cool as that is, generally makes the list worse. And then what's the other thing I want to say? So the skeleton warriors, the reason we've gone for ancient spears for them, and so you may have noticed before we did ancient blades. And the reason behind this is because with the other list, with the skeleton warriors, when the skeleton warriors go to attack, less for any specific reason, because you don't want to move them away from objective or within range of a buffing aura from a hero or something, you will pile in as many skeletons around the enemy and into the enemy as possible to maximize your attacks. Your skeleton warriors here, not necessarily unless you have to, because by piling them in, you may move your skeleton unit out of your territory, what automatically makes you lose that +1 save, which might not have been worth getting in those extra 5 skeletons or something to be able to do it. So ancient spears, sit back, not be able to pile in as much, but you've got the range to make up with it, with a range of 2 rather than 1 compared to the swords. So that is the idea about that. And it's also got 9 drops in this list. I think I'm just going to have a quick look. I think, yep, that is the smallest drop we've got, funny enough. And like I say, I'm not too fussed about that. I'm going to take what I want to take at the end of the day. So what I want to say about this list is there are some that have a lot of skeletons in, but there are some that just rely so much on direballs. And direballs, I honestly think are one of the best units in the game. Not because, like, what, that's better than Terrorgeist? No. But because they do their job so well and they can do a couple of jobs. And they really, really good. And they're also Battleline. You know, it's fantastic. But when we get to things like, which list was it? Think about it was the Legion of Blood list, where we have the 6 units of 5 direwolves and then the 3 vampire lords and zombie dragons. 6 units of direwolves, you know, even with unit of 5s, like I say, they could be killed easily and stuff, but because of their regeneration from grave sites, you can heal back quite a few wounds on some. So they can be quite resilient. If the enemy's only going to pepper attacks at your direwolves, they will, as long as you keep the grave sites within range of them, you'll probably be able to heal them back with not too much difficulty. And yeah, so that's just what I wanted to mention that when I talk about Legion of Blood, but I forgot, to be honest with you. So I'll mention it now. So those are my 4 lists. Like I say, not the most competitive lists out there, but lists that I have came up with and I think they would be fun to play. I'll be honest, because of how the world is at the moment, I haven't played any Age of Sigmar games for a long time. So, you know, it's just how it is. But I would like to try some of these lists out when I can get back to gaming, whenever that's going to be. And I think it was nice to come up with different Legion lists. Some of the lists will be better than others, but I think I've came up with a nice variety. And the most important thing here is not for you guys to go, oh, that's that's the list I want to take, that's it. But just to give you guys some inspiration behind making your own list. Hopefully I've said something in this video that has been useful. And what I wanted to say is that if you have enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe button as well if you haven't already, and click the bell notification so you make sure you won't miss any videos. I can't thank your support enough. It's been fantastic lately, and like I say, liking the videos does a massive job. I would like to say a massive shout out to my patrons as well, who, because of them, I can do this channel. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do it. So they're on the screen now, so a massive shout out to them. If you'd like to become a patron, you can click on the link in the description down below. Don't feel like you have to, but if you give anything from $1 a month it really helps me to be able to keep making videos, to be honest. So yeah, a massive shout out for them, and if they would like to become a patron with that. So what I also want to say is that, again, these list building videos are very new. This is only like my third one, and when you're doing them on different armies, it's quite hard to think about keeping them in the same format, and also be able to think of all right lists to review essentially. So what I'd like to say is I'd appreciate any feedback you want to give me about these videos. I'll be more than happy to hear it, as long as it's constructive. Otherwise, there's not really too much I can do about that. So I'd really appreciate your feedback. If there's anything you thought about these lists in particular, please let me know, as it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. But anyway, guys, so with that, I'm going to thank you very much for watching this video. Remember, until next time, to stay safe, stay hygienic, wear a mask, and of course, remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.